Hi, I'm Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about writing connects as a Microsoft employee. Now, if you're not a Microsoft employee, the concept of a connect is essentially just a performance review document. It's something that you put together and you're able to fill out to talk about your accomplishments, any setbacks, and goals that you plan to set for the next period. You fill this out and then you work with your manager to have a conversation on it, get alignment, and move forward. So this might be something that you do have at the company you work at, but it might look a little bit different. So in this video, I will be talking about the Microsoft flavor of this, but there still could be some great takeaways for you if you're not at Microsoft. I will be keeping this video ad-free, but if you're interested in seeing more of my content outside of YouTube, then you can follow DevLeader on different social media channels. Okay, to start things off, the structure of a connect ends up having something at the beginning that talks about your reflection. This is going to be a great opportunity for you to talk about your accomplishments. So you'll talk about all the things that went well, followed by an opportunity to talk about setbacks. I've kind of introduced this in the beginning of the video. Beyond that, you're able to set some goals and things that you want to be focused on for the upcoming period. And then at the very end of that, there's an opportunity to indicate some different things like conversation starters with your manager, because you are going to be discussing this with your manager. So that's the overall structure. And I'm going to go through this piece by piece and talk about how I think it's beneficial for you to focus on this. The first part, when we're talking about accomplishments, this is a great opportunity for you to talk about all of the impact that you've had. Now, a lot of people struggle with this, and one of the reasons they struggle with it is because they forget things, right? They're going to fill out their connect. In the organization that I'm in, connects are mandatory twice a year. So if you're doing this every 6 months, I mean, you might be like, I don't even know what I did 2 weeks ago, right? So coming up with this list of all the impact that you've had can be challenging for some people. If you stay to the end of this video, I will be talking about some other opportunities to help with this. So if you need to be able to talk about all of the work you've done, if you go the exact opposite direction, something that can be a little bit challenging is instead of not having anything to write about, you just document every single thing that you've done, like every single pull request you've done, everything that you've touched in the past period. But this is also not necessarily effective. It's better than having nothing to write about, because now you have a bunch of stuff, but it also makes it a little bit difficult to navigate. And this is from the perspective of an engineering manager who is going through these types of things with their employees. I even have to fill out a connect to go through with my own manager. An effective way that you can try to transform this is to think about the different impact that you've had across these different work streams. For example, if you've done a handful of pull requests on a particular feature, and even if that feature is part of multiple features working towards a bigger project that is having some business impact, talk about that business impact. Try to group these things up into some type of impact that you can talk about. For example, you could say that if you were working on a team that was trying to improve performance, you can talk about, I improved performance, from X to Y. If you literally have numbers like this, it's great. You can say, I worked on improving performance. And if it's helpful for you in trying to articulate just how you participated in doing this, it's a great opportunity to then say, okay, like I did this feature, this enhancement, and talk about some of the details. But going into extreme detail, like talking about lines of code and stuff like that, it's just too much. It's kind of missing the point. But like I said, having more is probably better than having absolutely nothing. My recommendation for you going through this section is to try thinking about the impact. It's also worth mentioning that at Microsoft, we have this concept of circles of impact, and this is a different twist on the business impact you're having and talking about how this impact affects potentially other people. So you could be having impact that contributes to the success of others. You could have impact that's building on the work of others, and you can also have impact that's directly correlated to the business. So depending on which features and work streams you're working on, you could call these things out as well. Overall, this section, when you're doing a reflection on your previous period and all of the work that you were doing, it's a great opportunity to showcase just how much impact you had. The next section, when we're talking about setbacks, I think this is something that some people get a little bit worried about. And they'll say, well, I don't want to talk about something that went bad because now that's going to set me up to have some type of failure documented. It's going to be held against me. It's going to look bad. But that's simply not the case. When we talk about setbacks, the idea behind this, at least from the manager's perspective, is that we know that everyone, managers, every single person, we're human. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be things that didn't go as planned, and that's okay. This is literally something that will happen to everyone. We don't plan for all of our failures. Obviously, if we could say, like, snap our fingers and never fail again, we would all do it. But it's going to happen. So instead of pretending like it's not happening, it's good to acknowledge it. And from there, what you can do is build on what you learned from it. This is really the takeaway. It's not so much that you're able to say, hey, I failed at something, it didn't go as planned, end of story. It's really all about what you learned from that. So something didn't go as planned. You broke the build, or you had a regression in production and you needed to have your change reverted. These types of things happen. What did you learn from that? Well, you might have gone through the process and realized that you skipped over some of the automation tests, or maybe they were broken. Or perhaps you were rolling out your change and you went a little bit too fast. You missed some scope of capacity that you should have been checking your change on. Maybe you had signals that you weren't monitoring. Whatever it happened to be, what did you learn from the mistake that was made? This part of the Connect is such an awesome opportunity to talk about growth. So instead of thinking, oh no, I have to write about a failure, this is going to look bad, flip it on its head. Think about this as an awesome opportunity for me to talk about the things that I've learned and how I plan to grow from them. The next section of the Connect that we'll be talking about is this opportunity to talk about goals or core priorities for the upcoming period. What I highly recommend to people to do is to have conversations with your manager leading up to this, right? You should hopefully have something in mind about the areas that you should be focused on. If you are a Microsoft employee, and for me, I work with an Office 365, or it's called Substrate as well. If you're working in Office 365, M365, we have something called the Talent Guide, and it's basically just a rubric. It's a formalized way that we can talk about across all the different roles and levels what the expectations are. If you haven't had a conversation with your manager about this, it's a great opportunity to bring it up. So if you've been doing this leading up to your Connect period and time for you to go write your Connect, you should have some idea about the areas that you need to focus on in terms of career growth. From there, what you can try to do is think about the different things in terms of projects that you know are coming up, or just things that you want to focus on for yourself, and write about those. This means that you're going to be demonstrating to your manager that you have awareness about the areas that you should be growing into. So you can do this in a couple of different ways, and I've seen people do it project-based because they have some visibility into what's up and coming. They have some idea about the work streams they're going to be working on in the upcoming period, and they will talk about the different projects. And again, this is a great opportunity to add in how that project is going to help in your own growth as well. Relating this back to business impact and opportunities is also a great choice. The other way that I've seen people do this is instead of focusing on particular projects, they instead just focus on general self-development. This can also be a great thing to do. I have employees over the past 4 years that have done both of these types of things. I've seen people mix and match them. I personally don't have a strong preference. I think whatever is going to help you as an individual articulate how you want to focus on your growth, I think that's important. For me as a manager, as I'm replying to my employees' comments on their Connects, if I've noticed that they've only talked about one side of this and not the other, I'll make sure to include in my comments some of the other perspective. So for example, if I have employees that are just talking about projects, I will also make sure that when I'm responding, I will talk about personal development. Things, again, that come from that talent guide, those other areas where we can say, hey, these are things that you need to improve on in terms of collaboration or writing design documents, things like that. If the employee has done the opposite, they've only talked about those types of things, then I will try to put in front of them potential projects that they could be working on that will also help align with that. In my response and through our conversation, I try to make sure that both things are covered. If you're finding that your manager's not doing this, this just might be something for you to think about in your conversation. So maybe plan to be able to include both of these things so you can ensure both are covered. These are the 3 major areas of the Connect, but I had 2 more bonus things that I wanted to include because I think they're super important for doing performance documents or Connects. It's a really good opportunity for this. The first one that I want to talk about is a Microsoft specific thing, but you might have something, again, similar at the company you work at. and that's called perspectives. Perspectives are a tool that we have at Microsoft to be able to request feedback from your peers. And it's a great opportunity, especially if you're working cross teams and you want to make sure that some of your impact and collaboration is documented. You can send a perspective to someone else on a different team that you've been working on. It could also just be one of your peers, your colleagues on your immediate team. You can send them a perspective and you can add a custom message like, hey, I know we collaborated on this project. Do you have any feedback for me? This feedback is not anonymous. And what's really cool about it too is that your manager has visibility into it. So if you've been having really good collaboration opportunities, it's a great way to have some of that documented because again, managers don't see absolutely everything. And if you're able to get some of that positive feedback documented, that can be a great thing to add in. Now, positive feedback aside, if someone has constructive criticism for you, I admit this is kind of rare to see in a tool like this because people are generally shying away from trying to not be mean or anything like that, even though there are some, really helpful ways to do this. If you do get constructive feedback, again, try not to panic, try not to say, oh no, now my manager is going to see that I have something to improve on. This is, again, an opportunity where you can take something like this, put it into your Connect. Talk about how you plan to address that, right? Hey, someone gave you feedback and they were suggesting that some project you were working on maybe didn't go as smoothly. There were some communication gaps. And you could say, yeah, if I reflect on that, maybe there's a better way that I could have communicated these things. Maybe next time I'll make sure to include my status updates or whatever the circumstances have to be. You can take some ownership here and communicate in your Connect or your performance document, whatever you're using, to be able to explain what you're going to do better. As engineers become more and more senior in their roles, there is an expectation that they are having more and more collaboration across teams to have bigger impact. So leveraging things like perspectives or just documented feedback from other peers, especially on different teams, is a really awesome add-in to all of this. And the final tip that I want to add in here is kind of back to the beginning of Connects, where I was saying most people have a challenge when they're talking about their accomplishments, and that's because they forget them. Now, there are many different ways that you can try doing this. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all type of thing, but I do think finding a way that works for you to document some of your accomplishments along the way is an excellent way to do it. Now, that could look like something like once a week you're taking some notes, maybe at the end of every day, maybe once a month. I don't know what the cadence needs to be for you, something you'll want to think about. But the other thing to layer into this is how you're going to document that. It could be something like a draft email to yourself. I've seen that work really well. It could be in your notebook. Maybe you have a spot where you can say, for this period, I'm going to be recording my accomplishments. Now I know when I go to write my Connect, I can refer back to that. You can use any number of note-taking tools that are digital. Whatever it happens to be, there's many tools you can use, and you need to think about what's going to work effectively for you. If you're trying it and it's not working because it feels like there's a lot of friction, try something else. It's totally cool. Personally, I go between things like notebooks and whiteboards. So if I need to track something long term, I probably want to find a better way than either of those two things because some of the stuff on my whiteboard is hung around for far too long, but generally something like a draft email works well for me. Or at Microsoft, I do leverage things like Loop or OneNote. So those are two tools that I found work well for me. Now, there is something else that floats around on the internet, and that is called a brag document. There's many variations of this, and I wanted to end this video by letting you know that I do have a free brag document that you can check out at this link up here. And that way, if you're interested in seeing some tool that might help you, you can come up with your own variation of this. It's literally just a structured document that lets you take notes in different categories. That way, when you're going through your Connect or your performance document, you can say, great, I had some of these accomplishments across these categories. Let me translate those into my performance document. So again, I'll have the link above. You can check that out. It's totally free. You don't have to pay a dime, and you're obviously welcome to customize it to your liking and your needs. So I hope you found that helpful. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.